Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast. We revisit the word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode.
You know, when a structural engineer builds a skyscraper, the whole process feels, well, intensely physical. You have cranes lifting thousands of tons of steel, concrete pouring into these massive foundations, the noise, the dust, it's all very tangible, right?
No, absolutely. It
Yeah.
feels undeniable. I mean, the sheer mass of it makes you think the building basically started the day the trucks arrived.
Right, but if you trace that skyscraper back to its absolute origin, you don't find steel or concrete. You just find a quiet room and a picture inside someone's head. The entire physical reality of that building depended entirely on that internal picture being drawn out first.
Yeah, that initial blueprint is everything.
Exactly. And the fascinating thing about the material we're exploring in today's deep dive is the argument that your personal economy, your career, your daily reality, they work exactly the same way. Whether you are navigating a really tough economic season right now or trying to launch a side hustle, this source insists your external world is just a trailing indicator of your internal imagery.
It is a profound concept. The material we are pulling from today is a transcript of a June 2026 sermon. It's titled, "The Picture Within: The Combined Power of the Mind and the Mouth." It was delivered by Pastor Paul Adefarasin at the House on the Rock Cathedral in Lagos, Nigeria.
Which is such a compelling source for this.
It really is. What makes this particular message so unique is how it bridges this deep spiritual theology with incredibly practical, almost gritty economic realities. The pastor is fundamentally trying to rewire his congregation's entire approach to wealth, mindset, and creating value.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand how he suggests we change our circumstances, we have to start with the why. Like, why do humans even have this ability to shape reality in the first place?
Right, he grounds this right away in the biblical concept that God created the universe via the spoken word. He references Psalm 119, verse 89, which says, "Forever, O Lord, your word is settled in heaven."
So the word isn't just descriptive.
Exactly. The underlying logic there is that the spoken word isn't just a tool to communicate what already exists. It's a generative force. It actually initiates creation. And he argues that because humans are made in the image of the Creator, we share three specific divine faculties.
Right, and those three are so central to this whole deep dive.
They are the entire framework. First, you have imagination, which takes place in the mind. Second, communication, which operates through the mouth. And third, unification, which is the physical action and coordination that forces the physical world to catch up.
I love the analogy he uses to illustrate this dynamic, the whole thermostat versus the thermometer concept. He points out that most people, they live their entire lives as human thermometers.
Just completely reactive.
Exactly. They just reflect the economic or social temperature of whatever environment they are placed in. If the economy takes a downturn, their internal anxiety spikes. But this spiritual framework is calling you to operate as a thermostat. You are supposed to walk into a room, assess the temperature, and then internally dictate what the new temperature is going to be.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this sermon is actively combating a deeply entrenched religious narrative. For centuries, there's been this cultural assumption that piety equals poverty.
Oh, yeah. The idea that suffering makes you holy.
Right, the idea that to be truly close to God, you have to embrace lack and marginalization. Pastor Adefarasin just forcefully rejects that. He argues that God's domain, heaven, is a realm of extreme, incalculable value and absolute abundance.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It really is. Therefore, God expects his earthly representatives to operate with that same super-value overflow to bless the world. Poverty in this framework isn't holy at all. It's actually a restriction on your ability to distribute value to others.
Which naturally leads to a pretty massive question, right? If we all possess this internal thermostat, this divine architecture to create reality, why is the vast majority of the world struggling so much? What is breaking down in the machinery?
Well, the pastor attributes that breakdown to the battle of the mind. He uses Proverbs 21.5 as the anchor here, which says, "The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of everyone that is hasty, only to want."
The key word there being only, right?
Spot on. A diligent mind is trained to strictly filter out concepts of lack, focusing only on abundance or plenteousness. When people struggle, it's because their internal filter is broken. They allow what he calls friction points to bottleneck their imagination.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because let's explore those friction points.
Yeah.
He uses this wild example involving Aliko Dangote, the Nigerian billionaire.
Oh, the $10 million deal example. That part is brilliant.
It's so good. He points out that if you ask an average worker to visualize handling a $10 million business deal, their brain basically short circuits. It creates this massive psychological friction point. They look at the cost of their groceries, and their mind just rejects $10 million as a terrifying impossibility.
Right, the anxiety just takes over.
But if you bring that same $10 million scenario to Dangote, like as a bridge loan to make a $120 million return, his pulse doesn't even elevate. There is zero friction.
And the profound takeaway there is that we do not see circumstances as they are. We see things as we are. The $10 million didn't change at all.
Exactly. The math is the exact same.
The only variable that changed was the internal capacity of the mind evaluating it. The average worker's mind is heavily guarded by friction points that just immediately kill any vision of scale.
But this makes me wonder, how do we actually lower that friction? I mean, I can't just wake up tomorrow, look at my bank account, and pretend a $10 million risk doesn't terrify me. Is there an actual practical mechanism for reprogramming our minds? I have to ask about his reference to Rich Dad, Poor Dad here.
Yes, that is exactly how he addresses it. The practical habit is all about controlling the internal questions we ask ourselves. He uses that Rich Dad, Poor Dad example to show how we accidentally program these friction points into ourselves and even our kids.
Right, like when a kid asks for a swimming pool.
Exactly. The reflexive poor mindset response is, take that out of your mind, we can't afford it. And that statement is a mental dead end. The brain just accepts the defeat and shuts off.
It just kills the imagination instantly.
It does. But the practical takeaway, the alternative approach, is shifting that statement into a question. Instead of saying, we can't afford it, you ask, how are we going to get it?
Wow. It changes the whole situation from an insurmountable wall into a puzzle.
Psychologically, that is exactly what happens. The human brain hates open loops. When you ask a how question, you put a demand on your subconscious to start scanning your environment for resources or knowledge that can solve it. You have to strictly filter your imagination and catch yourself the moment you accept a limitation.
That reframing actually ties perfectly into his unique definition of anxiety. I mean, he doesn't just treat anxiety as an emotional failing. He defines it as simply using your present creative energy to imagine a negative, unwanted future outcome.
It is a stunning distillation of the concept. If imagination is a divine faculty meant to generate reality, then worrying is essentially praying for what you don't want.
You're literally building a blueprint for failure.
Right. You are taking the immense power of your focus, projecting it into the future, and vividly illustrating your own disaster. The call to action is to consciously arrest that negative imagery. You have to actively replace the anxiety with the anticipation of abundance.
Okay, but let's talk about the gap between the internal and the external. I can perfectly guard my mind from anxiety, ask all the right how questions, but a picture in my head doesn't pay the rent. The thought has to cross over into physical reality. How does he bridge that gap?
This is where we transition to the second faculty, the power of the mouth. The internal picture must be given physical substance through sound. He leans on several major scriptures for this.
Like Proverbs 13.2, right?
Yes, a man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth. Also Mark 11.23 and 24, about speaking to the mountain. And Job 22.28, thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee.
He is incredibly insistent that words are not just passive descriptions. They aren't just us reporting on the weather of our lives. They are active instructions. And he tells this incredibly funny, almost bizarre story from his early days as a single pastor to prove it.
Oh, the story about the imaginary marriages.
Yes. He talks about waking up in the morning and literally feeling the psychological weight of all these single women in his church who supposedly wanted to marry him. He claimed he could feel the projections of these imaginary marriages trying to attach to his future.
And his response wasn't just to quietly ignore it. He would wake up in his empty bedroom and loudly, verbally reject those projections. He would speak out loud saying, I reject it, I revoke it, I refuse it.
He was using his mouth as a weapon to protect his path, but wait shouting at bedroom walls to repel imaginary marriages. I have to play devil's advocate here. How is this not just magical thinking? How does talking to an empty room actually do anything?
What's fascinating here is that the mechanism behind it is actually heavily rooted in behavioral psychology. He calls this practice conversations for conversion.
Conversion, like religious conversion.
Not just religion salvation, no. He expands it to mean converting the atmosphere around you, starting with your own neurology. You have internal conversations talking out loud to yourself to lock in your faith and maintain your sanity. When you speak something out loud, you create an auditory feedback loop. Your ears hear your own voice establishing a boundary, which forces cognitive alignment.
So it solidifies your conviction internally.
Exactly. And it also scales up to external conversations. You use your words to negotiate or to cast vision to a team. You are converting an invisible idea into a physical medium. The practical commitment he's calling for is to make out loud proclamations.
If you believe a vision is from God, you must decree it verbally. Think about how often we casually joke about being broke or agree with pessimistic headlines just to make conversation at work.
It's so common, but it's destructive.
Right. Those aren't harmless jokes. You are actively writing bad code into your life's operating system. You cannot entertain or speak words of lack or rationalize lies.
Which brings us to the ultimate friction point for a lot of people. You have the mind imagining abundance, the mouth boldly decreeing it, but a loudly spoken vision is still just noise if it isn't backed by the third faculty.
Unification, the action part. Because I can't just vibrate with positive energy on my couch and expect a check to arrive, right?
Exactly. You can't just think and speak. You must do. The pastor calls this the formidable factory of activity.
Yeah.
You have to create value for others. And he gives a highly specific, practical definition of wealth here.
Which is what, exactly?
He defines wealth as your verified ability to produce something of virtue for somebody else. People exchange their money, which is just stored time and energy, for the value you provide them.
So what does this all mean when life throws actual ruinous disasters at you? Because he points to the biblical story of Joseph to explore this, which is just a gauntlet of worst-case scenarios.
Joseph goes from a pit to chains to Potiphar's house to a dungeon and then to a palace.
Right. Most people hitting the pit would assume the vision in their mind was a lie. But these weren't just obstacles for Joseph. They were the actual process of building his capacity to create value.
That is the crucial reframe. The pit and the prison were Joseph's university. He had to learn administration and asset management as a slave so that later, in the palace, he had the tangible capacity to manage a national economy.
It's just like lifting weights. The resistance isn't the universe trying to crush you. It's the mechanism creating the micro tears in the muscle so you can carry heavier weight later.
That is the perfect parallel. And he expands on this with modern examples, too. He brings up Burna Boy exporting African rhythm globally, or the Ibano supermarket franchise scaling its culture of service.
He doesn't sugarcoat the real barriers either, does he?
Not at all. He impartially notes systemic barriers, whether it's political movements in the West, like Mengi'e, or local economic hardships, but he insists the listeners must become entrepreneurs regardless.
He says the private sector, not the government, will rebuild the infrastructure.
Exactly. He boldly prophesies that the Western wealth extracted during colonialism will actually find its way back to Africa, not through aid, but through the high-value innovations of the continent's people.
So the practical habit for the listener to apply here is finding what he calls a void. He tells the congregation to look at the deprivations of their own childhoods or the painful needs of their current communities and build businesses or skill sets that fill those exact voids for others.
You locate the void, you manufacture the value to fill it, and wealth is the byproduct.
Let's summarize this journey because it's a brilliant blueprint. Wealth and success start by fiercely guarding your imagination to only picture abundance. Then you command your mouth to decree that vision. And finally, you put your hands to work, creating tangible value to solve other people's problems.
It is a complete, holistic system.
And for you listening right now, whether you are prepping for a boardroom meeting, starting a side hustle, or just navigating a tough economy, this sermon offers a blueprint. You are not a victim of your environment. You are equipped with the exact faculties needed to reshape it.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought from the source to leave you with. The pastor noted that you will never out-earn your own internal self-image.
That is heavy.
It demands total accountability. So, to ponder long after this deep dive ends, if your current bank account or career status is just a physical receipt for the value you've provided to others so far, what specific hidden void in the world are you uniquely designed to fill that you've been too anxious to finally speak into existence?
Wow, what a question to end on. Remember, the picture has to be drawn before the concrete can be poured. So what picture are you drawing today?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. follow the podcast. And please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.